Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Long Shots, our weekly podcast on business and finance and pretty much anything we find relevant, interesting or intriguing. First, as usual, a few house rules. We are now streaming on Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify and Deezer and many other podcast apps. The feeds are going everywhere. So do check it out, do subscribe so that you get that nice little notification whenever our podcast goes live. I have with me Sharad and this is Nikhil.
Hi Nikhil, how are you? It's good to be here again.
All good, man, all good. So very, I think, news heavy week.
Oh yeah.
Starting from Monday in terms of, central bank, a lot of motions going on, then assembly elections on Tuesday, then new governor appointment already. I think it was Tuesday evening or Wednesday. Yeah. Today is Thursday. I don't know what's... tomorrow is a board meeting by RBI, the first board meeting from the new governor. Yeah. So very, like a journalist and a news junkie's delight.
Extremely busy, and I think there'll be a lot of individuals will be very upset that what do they have to do to make the front pages because they're missing out.
I think Mr. Patel was also missing out,
Mr. Patel, Mr. Mallya,
Mr. Mallya as well. I forgot him completely.
What do they have to do to be in the spotlight is probably what they're wondering.
Yeah, it's so funny because when you mentioned Vijay Mallya, I was like, that also happened on Monday. Yeah. I completely forgot that an Indian court might soon be hosting him.
Yeah, he must be wondering, what do I have to do to make the front pages?
He tweeted also, right, the week before.
Did he?
Yeah, he said that I'm telling all the Indian banks that I'm ready to pay back all the loans, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, just the principal, not the interest. Yeah. So that got him a bit of buzz. How noble, yes. And then on Monday, obviously, that hearing in London came across. But I think he still has a right to appeal. Yeah. So I'm guessing he might not, see an Indian immigration official soon. Yeah. Some time to go there. But the biggest story has been RBI in my mind. I mean, obviously, assembly elections are pretty big, but since we are so anally against talking about anything relevant to politics, so we can let that slide.
Obviously, both of us, I think, fairly confident that if we really want to talk about RBI and what has happened, we can probably talk about it for hours. We'll not do that today, but obviously such a massive, it's just got so much of signaling effect. There's so much of symbolic value. There's so many other things that this means. Urjit Patel's resignation and of course Shaktikant Das's subsequent appointment. What are your views on it? And I think we've been discussing this RBI versus sort of government over the last 3 weeks, at least on podcast itself, on how they're in a tussle with surplus funds and several autonomy and how much is right, how much control is wrong, things like that. So not entirely surprising in terms of how it's come out, but I'm still a little surprised.
No, I'm actually, I'm fairly surprised as well because I think the last time we talked about it was when the last board meeting happened. That was, I think, 19th of November. Yeah. And we kind of sensed that a more mature approach has finally been taken by both the finance ministry as well as RBI. Yeah. But I think there were still some unresolved issues. Yeah. Just to kind of give, because there's so much noise in terms of what all happened, I think best way to kind of talk about this would be to start from the start. So on Monday evening, I think there was a breaking news aftermarket. There was a breaking news notification everywhere that Urjit Patel has resigned. Then we went to the RBI website to check out the actual press release. Yeah. Very, tersely worded release in which he obviously acknowledged personal reasons, boilerplate, yeah. And but the strange thing was that he resigned with immediate effect. Yeah. So he had a couple of months, I think 7-8 months left in his term. Yeah. So no transition, nothing. Immediately he was out, and the markets obviously, I think INR rupee kind of tanked.
Yeah. It hit 72, I think.
Yeah, and the next day I won't say markets were pretty much only driven by this because I think the assembly elections also had a lot of noise coming in. Yeah. I think the very next day, Shaktikant Das, a career bureaucrat who worked in the finance ministry, was the economic affairs secretary. He was appointed as the new governor for a 3-year term.
Is he? When was the last time we had a non-economist RBI governor?
Good question. I have no idea actually. I mean, he's a history major, but he has worked a lot in the finance ministry. He has worked on a lot of economic portfolios portfolios. So he's kind of termed as an economic bureaucrat, quote unquote, by most press. He's a 1980 Tamil Nadu cadre IAS officer. And his hands are full because the very first board meeting after he has taken, the position at helm is going to happen tomorrow. And there's a lot of speculation because, as you know, we have kind of spoken about all the bones of contention between the central bank and the government being, how much reserve the bank should hold, how much they should dividend to the government, their tussle over who can be a payments regulator with regard to data localization, and obviously the usual, interest rates. The government wants rates to be low, but the central bank obviously has a opposing thought process around that. I think government also doesn't like the fact that there's an MPC now. Right? They would rather have one person take the decision. But I mean, definitely there was a lot of questions being asked about how the government is pushing the limit in terms of reaching the independence of RBI. And certainly this appointment does not help.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, if anything, it's counterintuitive. It seems like more of a handpicked yes man rather than, I mean, I might be going extremely in the extreme by saying that without any evidence, but it seems more towards, rather than independence, going the other way, more towards a collaborative government approach, which is fine to an extent, like we talked about, but there it is an autonomous body at the end of the day, and I think the final say ought to be with, it's hard to say, but it does not impress me that much. Let's call it
because I mean, both the institutions, be it the Finance Ministry and RBI, they have such opposing objectives, right?
Exactly,
One is looking at spending. The other is looking at macroeconomic stability and price control. So no wonder there's conflict. There has always been conflict.
And there's another thing which is completely different is misaligned conflict, misaligned interest is the fact of elections and politics. Like spending is one. The second is just to get back into power.
Because with the general elections looming in, obviously there's a lot of pressure on the government to somehow expand its fiscal base, but it is pretty constrained to do that at the moment, so no wonder they are pushing the bank to release more reserves and pretty much convert a monetary policy provision for their fiscal usage, and which obviously it's a problem. I mean, I still think there are enough checks and balances that I don't think we are kind of going towards the route of Argentina or Venezuela.
I hope not. I certainly hope not. But I mean, that would be disastrous, of course.
Right.
But they all started with something like this.
The main debate right now, or the main, I think where the narrative is going wrong right now is that people are saying that, why don't we have this person is not an economist, he's not from a technical background. Why is he being asked as, to lead the central bank? I personally don't think it's about that. I personally think that it's more a question of having an inside man on the job. Because, I mean, the government has tried their hand with external economists. They had Raghuram Rajan, did not work out. They brought in Urjit Patel, an RBI inside man, but still an economist.
Correct,
a technocrat, so to say, right? But obviously, as you know, all technocrats or all technically solid people, they don't really like to be pushed around, right? So that did not work. Now I think the government is like, okay, let's get someone from the system. And that will definitely have, I mean, I just don't even think it's just optics. I think that will definitely have an effect on, I would not be surprised if there's some farm loan waiver announced.
I think they're already talking about it.
There's already some speculation on that. Or, that the stressed banks, they would be churned out of the PCA framework so they can lend more. But it's just that, economics doesn't work like that. If you do that, I think if you play with those very basic fundamental drivers, the effect can be very long lasting, much beyond 2019. So
I agree 100%. And the market sort of agrees with you as well. I mean, if you see Yes Bank stock and sort of the public sector banks, they all were up yesterday on this appointment, partially at least.
They agree with me, but they're still liking it.
They're still liking it. I mean, at the end, traders are there to make the money, right? I mean, I think the narrative is that there will be some kind of get out of jail free card being thrown around.
So just to get a recap, what happened with Yes Bank exactly?
Well, Yes Bank, obviously there are 2-3 things going at parallel, but one is obviously they're appointing the new CEO today.
Right.
So there's some noise around it, but also this guy, Shaktikant Das's appointment is sort of being probably viewed as someone who'll not pull out the whip in terms of their bad loan exposure,
right,
and sort of cut them some slack, I guess. And third, overall monetary policy. I mean, I don't know, but although he says inflation targeting and maintaining growth, but I won't be surprised if there's a rate cut or something of that nature.
Oh wow, okay. So no wonder Yes Bank is up.
Market was up and Yes Bank was definitely up, yeah.
Right.
But we'll obviously, it's a wait and watch story.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think there might be some. I mean, I might be thinking too ahead of time right now. But I was reading this very interesting article by Daniel Moss from Bloomberg on this entire thing, and he was saying that immediately after the new RBI governor got appointed, there were a lot of comparisons being made in media on how RBI is now similar to Federal Reserve. In Federal Reserve you obviously have Trump putting a lot of pressure, and in RBI the finance ministry or the government is putting a lot of pressure. And he was like, fundamentally, that's an incorrect way to think about the two institutions. Whereas the Federal Reserve in US is answerable to the Congress, RBI is still accountable to the executive. So there's a much higher probability of institutional weakening in RBI's case. Unfortunately,
that's interesting.
I found that entire. I think that might. Some reform-minded policymaker, I think in the future should think about that. That how to actually make maybe RBI answerable to the House rather than. I mean, US and India systems are different. But I think this kind of accountability point makes the probability of institutional weakening quite high.
No, that's obviously we'll wait and watch and what happens out of the board meeting tomorrow.
Yes.
That'll be the first time Shaktikant Das is involved in it, and I think he already said that he's up to speed with everything and he's very happy with the inflation numbers.
Right.
So the fact that it's in check, and he's already saying that that's going to be his core premise of managing the monetary policy anyway. So all that seems fine.
Right.
I mean, what else would anyone say? These all seem very boilerplate type stuff. But it's what happens with the surplus and all these little nuances which I think will dictate how autonomous it is. And
devil is in the details.
The devil is in the details, as they say.
So I think as it will unravel, we'll know.
Well,
in terms of also like because we mentioned the Federal Reserve in the US as well, interesting times. If not in US actually, in your old home in Canada, interesting things are happening. If you are the CFO of a top Chinese smartphone maker, you can get arrested in Canada.
You can get arrested in Vancouver. Yes, it's the script of this is, I think, will come into a movie or a TV show in the next 5-10 years.
Right.
Because it's got a lot of drama and thriller element to it.
Right.
So what has happened, essentially, what you're talking about is Huawei, which is a Chinese smartphone maker and electronics company.
Right.
It's the world's largest supplier of telecom network equipment. It, I think, did about 92 billion in revenues last year.
Right.
So fairly big. CFO Meng Wanzhou,
right,
while she was traveling in Vancouver, I think she's got a couple of houses or homes in Vancouver as well. She got arrested by the Canadian police,
right,
and was detained. And now, why she was arrested? Was it from US directive? There are a lot of little things moving around here, but the popular narrative is that she was arrested on US's direction, and the boilerplate, the largely documented reason, one of them is that she misled into believing a few US banks about a subsidiary of Huawei.
Right.
And did deals with Iran, which broke the sanction law. So that's the reason for her being arrested. But there's so many elements there's so many layered elements which make it for an interesting case. One of which is that Huawei has been accused of putting backdoor in their devices which are being shipped to US or where not. And Americans or the US popularly view it as sort of being spied on by the Chinese.
So it's military. Like some spyware is being included in Huawei devices which are being sold in the US?
Yes. That's speculation.
That's the theory.
That's a speculation.
Right.
Canada and Germany have said that we have enough security systems to detect it if there is one.
Right.
But, so in fact, Donald Trump, I think, has...
But, is Huawei such a big smartphone player?
Yeah, it's the second biggest in the world.
Okay. And and US plays a fairly major role in its overall revenue profile, I guess, right? Because I remember, I think a few years back, Huawei was pretty much like a copycat type of a model, but I think lately they have really picked up in terms of their chip making technology, in terms of their hardware, to be a competitive force in the US.
That's absolutely correct. In fact, there's market leaders in parts of Europe and Asia as well.
Okay.
So, and US as well. AT&T and which is the other big one? Verizon. They used to carry the Huawei phones, and now they're not on orders from the government. But
yeah, because I think Trump banned Trump also banned for any government use.
Yes. He was government, and he also told corporates to be wary of it. Okay. There is a little bit of spy and element underneath all this, but to what extent, we don't know. But interestingly, you brought the chip angle, because that's very important in today's world, because they have invested a lot in R&D.
Right.
And they are sort of growing their presence. So they're not really they don't have that perception of being the cost cutter, copycat kind of profile.
Right.
They've evolved from that over the years.
Right.
And they're even leaders in 5G deployment technology, 5G network deployment. So let's see.
So chip making, the reason why I think I mentioned chip making was because interestingly, Economist ran a cover story, I think 2 weeks back, which was titled Chip Wars. And the theory which was being presented in that cover story was that the entire US-China trade war is about microchips.
That's a very interesting narrative, and I find it very amusing, and probably cannot even disagree with it too much.
Because their rationale was that if you look, like you remember in our high school computer science lessons, the Moore's law, right?
Yeah.
Every 2 years, the computing capacity spikes up.
Correct. Yeah.
Apparently, that Moore's law is now hitting a threshold.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that new breaking technology, be it quantum computing, all those things are getting unlocked.
Yeah.
In order to ensure that trajectory keeps on going.
Yeah.
And so the real estate of the silicon wafer has become very, very important. And that's supposed to be the backbone for everything from artificial intelligence to machine learning technologies, and obviously big applications in defense.
Yeah.
And US, companies like Intel had for quite some time a literal monopoly in terms of R&D, whereas China was really down in the value chain.
Yeah.
But companies like Huawei is turning that around.
Yeah.
With the investments in R&D and everything. They are now pretty much, one of the leaders in chip making. And they say that, the trade war is, chips were a part of the tariff announced. And the trade wars are pretty much about that. And I think Huawei is kind of stuck in that entire, I would say, tsunami of events.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And as we evolve more and more with technology being a key element to everything we do, from defense systems to food, whatever it is, chips are central to it.
Yeah.
And there is a popular narrative out there that whoever wins the semiconductor race or whoever controls it will ultimately have the biggest, say in trade wars, and will have the competitive advantage.
Right.
Clearly, Chinese have caught up in that domain. They've invested heavily, state-owned as well. And another interesting angle which makes Huawei somewhat, questionable is that it's very closely linked with the government.
Yes, the founder is a Communist Party member, right?
Yeah, a former military as well.
Oh, right.
And there's a new law in China that Chinese companies ought to help the government if and when they require it.
Right.
So I see where the American concerns are coming from. That it's not a typical public company that you see in India or the US. Independent sort of. I remember when the government wanted data from Google or Facebook or WhatsApp. Like there are always. You don't get it easily.
Right.
But in China, if they want, they can get it. So there's obviously concern there. And quite rightly, I agree.
Right.
So I see where they're coming from. And when you have close ties with the government and you make semiconductor chips which are floating around in the US, which potential backdoor technology to spy, obviously you should be concerned.
Right.
I think so. That's a valid point. But obviously Huawei says that we don't have anything like that, and
so China has taken technology transfer to another level now.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that's exactly it, right? The image of long assembly lines and copycat approaches is now changed into leaders of chip making.
Yeah, and this another incident which kind of reflects this dynamic is, like I told you about this. There's this niche company called ARM.
Yeah,
ARM.
British.
It's Cambridge based in UK. It's supposed to be another, kind of a behemoth of research and development with regard to microchips. It's supposed to be like the next thing to Intel. It's so big.
Yeah.
It got acquired by SoftBank because there were a lot of Chinese interest in that asset. And SoftBank is obviously headed by Masayoshi Son, Korean, Japanese, close to the US regime.
Yeah.
So they say that it was pretty much US which was, pushed SoftBank to get it before the Chinese acquire it. So definitely Netflix worth material.
probably there already is a show that we're not aware about, but chip making and drama around it with it's like sort of got a Cold War vibe to it.
Yeah.
Except instead of space, it's chips now.
Right.
But it's got that nuance to it.
Correct.
And we're wondering about oil prices and world is talking about chips. Anyway, that's a discussion that we can have at length.
We anyways come up with like 2 to 3 ideas for Netflix shows in the episode, right?
Yeah.
So
no, but that ARM company is very interesting, and because you were talking about it, so obviously keep a close eye. And since we're talking about a British company, I think we can nicely segue into the latest updates on your former turf.
Yes.
And their decision to Brexit, if you will. Obviously, we've talked about this as well, and there's several moving pieces, and now it's become more of a political rather than economic debate.
Yes.
So what's happening there?
Very active week news-wise on Brexit front as well.
Yeah.
There was basically, you remember, like we kind of talked about the draft withdrawal deal that Theresa May brought forward, which most of her party, like not most of her party, but large segments of her party were against it. So, but it got approved through the EU 27 member states.
Yeah.
So then the next step for them was to get it approved through the British Parliament. And that was supposed to happen this Tuesday.
Yeah.
But May sensed that she won't get the numbers to get that deal passed. So she basically took the decision to, get the vote pulled off from Tuesday.
Okay.
And instead of Tuesday, now the vote is supposed to happen on 21st, or before 21st of January. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, immediately after that, there were like a lot of internal, mayhem in the Conservative Party, and there was a no confidence motion put against Theresa May yesterday, which she has won.
Okay.
Yeah, that just came out like 2 hours back. She has won by like 83 margin.
Yeah.
And this deal is now, kind of tilted towards an approval or rejection on 21st of January. But, my sense is that a lot of the people in the UK, a lot of the policymakers in the UK are now kind of tilting towards a second referendum.
That's crazy to me. That's so counterintuitive. Like, what is the meaning of a referendum if you need another one?
I think the argument is the referendum number 1. Like, what was the referendum number 1? What exactly was the question in the referendum? Do you want UK to be a part or not? Yes, no, whatever, right? It was as simple as that. Yeah. So people answered that question. But the argument is that in the next few months, with all this information coming in, people will now be much better informed in what they have gotten into. So they might as well, with this new information, come up with a renewed view that now they actually know what a Brexit might look at.
This is such a waste of taxpayers' money from where I see it.
Yeah.
But here's my question to you. Let's say they do another referendum. This time they say stay, okay? Now, will there be an argument for having a best of 3 now?
I don't know, man. I think this is all pretty unprecedented in terms of what the protocol will be. So what has exactly happened is that from the last referendum, when they voted in favor of Brexit, Article 50, which is the kind of official vehicle in the European Union, that was triggered, right?
Yeah.
And now all this, indecisiveness came in after that. And what really, I think, stirred the discussion back was, number one, the European Court of Justice last week said that, okay, if UK wants to kind of, stay in the EU, they can kind of just make the referendum null. They're free to do that.
Yeah.
So they gave that option. Okay, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Sir John Major, who's a former, why am I saying Sir John Major? John Major, who's a former PM of UK. He then mentioned that, preferably Article 50 should be revoked.
Yeah.
Then what will be the next step, right? You can't just, and you have to think of it like Britain is a country, referendums are fairly recent there. They take a lot of pride in their parliamentary process. And this is for the first time where their entire parliamentary process has been kind of put in a deadlock because of this referendum. Yeah. Because nobody really wants to, nobody really knows in which form or fashion this should go ahead.
Yeah, I personally am not the biggest fan of referendums as a method. Because especially when you're talking about issues which economists and experts and subject matter experts should be making a decision for, that's what elections are for.
Yeah, that's why you voted them in, right?
Yeah, you voted them in to take those decisions, right? So now you're giving me back the power to make that decision while I appreciate it.
You're such a strong proponent of parliamentary democracy, Sharan.
Yes, I am.
There is another school of thought which thinks like, there should be direct democracy, straight from the people.
People are not experts enough to make that decision.
Right.
Like,
You think MPs are?
We voted them in under that assumption.
Right.
Yes, MPs, if you don't think MPs are, then we shouldn't vote for them. I agree. That's opening up another debate of quality of MPs as such.
Right.
But in general, if you ask today let's go in India and ask them about what should RBI do with the surplus funds. Yes, no, can't say. There is no logic in what people will say. People don't even know what surplus is. People don't even understand what will happen. A lot of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have people who understand such a small majority. So you're letting people who are not experts in the field to make decisions which have far-reaching repercussions.
Probably, like it's kind of a consequence of, I want to use a big word now, I think it's a consequence of like the hubris, that was ongoing within the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
I think they didn't expect that the people are going to vote for a Brexit.
Yeah.
So I think they were like, let's do a referendum. Let's close this chapter for once. That David Cameron kind of took that gamble that definitely we won't get voted out or whatever.
Yeah.
And it really happened. So now they are just struggling to understand where they fit themselves in.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. So I'm glad we had this discussion on how parliamentary democracy should be structured.
Maybe we should dedicate in our next episode, whenever it is, one full segment on parliamentary discussion.
I don't see any problem in that. I think it's an ideal topic for our weekly discussion. Well, with that out, I think we are pretty much done for the week. We are thinking of having another episode next week. That can be like our season finale.
And do we have someone special joining in?
Yes, we have. And but yeah, I won't disclose it right now. I think let's keep that as a surprise.
Okay.
But yeah, we have someone. So it will be a 3-party conversation. So I would definitely welcome all the listeners to queue in. And yeah, it's going to be the end of season 1, 16 episodes, and then we are going to come back in the new year.
Do hit back at the chalkboard and try to figure out
Whiteboard, my friend. No more chalkboard now.
Yeah, that's true.
And so with that being said, just another friendly reminder, if you like this podcast, do like it, not just like it in your head, but actually press the button on your phone, and do feel free to rate it. Please do send us your feedback. We also run an online news company by the name of Transfin with a special emphasis on business, finance and consumer oriented content. So do check out our website. I highly recommend all the interesting articles which are coming from Transfin's high potential in-house team, as well as our set of contributors. So do check that out. This is Nikhil Arora.
And this is Sharat.
Signing off.